Welcome to Flavortext, a podcast that explores the intersection between lore, story and gameplay of Arkham Horror, the card game. I'm Kevling, and I'm joined as always by, well, no one actually. Krabby Terror is busy compiling a background lore episode for our upcoming look at the Forgotten Age for Season 3 of the podcast. We recently wrapped up Carcosa with a look at the return box and specifically going through each of the Carcosa investigators. And we realised that's something we didn't do for the Dunwich Legacy, and we've had a few messages asking if we could do just that. And so here we are. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes just taking a quick look at each of the Dunwich investigators and how well or not their character and background are reflected in their stats, in their cards and how they play. So let's start off with Zoe. First of all, let's read her backstory. Zoe had known that she was special ever since God spoke to her one night when she was 6 years old. The night that terrible fire took away her parents. He told her that he had chosen her from among all the people of the world to become his agent. She would protect the innocent and punish the wicked. Since then, he comes to her in times of trouble, offering guidance and comfort. Zoe now travels from city to city, taking work as a chef to support herself. When she isn't working, she stalks the night, guided by the Lord's voice. Wherever she finds wickedness, she strikes it down, without remorse or hesitation. So, Zoe the chef. She's got a willpower of 4, intellect of 2, combat of 4, evade of 2, with the traits of believer and hunter. She has the reaction ability, after you become engaged with an enemy, gain 1 resource. So I think that could probably be likened that she just lives for engaging enemies. She is on a mission from God, to quote the Blues Brothers. It's what drives her. The sheer notion of facing her enemies, it feeds her obsession and fuels her to carry on. Her Herald Sign effect is +1, and if this is successful during an attack, then it deals +1 damage. So again, that's another sort of her righteousness coming to the fore, smiting down these enemies with extra damage. Bit of flavour text there. God has spoken. I will do his work without hesitation. And her health line is 9 physical health, but only 6 mental health. So it kind of reflects there. She's a little bit fragile mentally, as is pretty clear from her story. She's been through a lot. Her parents died in a fire, and now she sees God speaking to her and driving her on to take down the demons. But she is physically very strong with a 9. That is pretty much the highest stat. In terms of her deck building requirements, nothing specific there. She's basically a guardian, and she can take neutral cards. As with all of the Dunwich investigators, they can take 5 level 0 cards from other classes, and I won't bother repeating that for all of the other investigators because they're all effectively the same deck building rules. Her signature item is Zoe's Cross. Unsurprisingly, it is a symbol of righteousness. Its item and charm trait, it's cost 1 to put this asset into play. It's got 2 combat and a wild pip. But it has the reaction ability of after an enemy comes engaged with you, you can exhaust Zoe's Cross and spend a resource and deal 1 damage to that enemy. And it takes up the accessory slot. So that sort of combos nicely with Zoe's innate reaction ability. So an enemy engages her, she automatically gets a resource from her ability. At that same time, at that same trigger, she can then spend that resource to exhaust the cross and deal 1 damage straight at that enemy before anything has even happened. Moving on to her weakness, Smite the Wicked. It's classed as a task, and on revelation you discard cards from the top of the encounter deck until you find an enemy basically. Attach Smite the Wicked to that enemy and spawn it at the location farthest from you. And forced when the game ends, if the attached enemy is still in play, you'd suffer a mental trauma. So basically, Zoe perceiving God sending her a message, there is this evil out there that needs smiting, but it's way over there in her distance. It's sort of playing into her obsessions, because if she doesn't get to that enemy and she doesn't give it a damn good smiting, she's going to be mentally traumatized for the rest of the campaign. Okay, so that's Zoe. Moving on to the rogue is... not the rogue, the seeker is Rex Murphy, the reporter. So let's read his backstory. When disaster strikes, Rex Murphy is usually on hand suffering the consequences. After spending a day with Rex, even the most hardened skeptic will concede that the man is cursed. Any time he had a lead on a good story, something would go wrong. That business in Innsmouth with the photographs that had blown out to sea, the tracks in Dunwich that had washed away in the rain just before he'd brought the sheriff, his terrible fortune has more than once exposed him to gruesome beasts and occult conspiracies. To survive, Rex has developed an inquisitive mind, keeping one step ahead of the next disaster. So Rex is a reporter. His stat line is 3 willpower, 4 intellect, 2 combat, 3 evade. And here he has a reaction ability of after you succeeded a skill test by 2 or more while investigating, discover 1 clue at your location. And I think that's been modified in the taboo list to be once per round. He has the Elder Sign ability of +2. You may instead choose to automatically fail this test to draw 3 cards. This time, nothing will stop me from getting at the truth. And his health stats are effectively the opposite of Zoe. He's only got 6 physical health, but 9 mental health. So he's not so strong physically, but he's got the sort of the fortitude to stand up against the insanities he is facing. And interestingly, with Rex being a reporter, he actually has a deck building restriction. He's not allowed to include any fortune cards in his deck. And I think that's quite thematic, really. He's a reporter. He only trusts the facts. He's not going to rely on luck or hunches and such like. Just the facts, man. Just the facts. So his signature card is Search for the Truth. It's a 1-cost event. Its pips are 2 intellect and 1 wild. It's an insight trait. When you play this event, you draw X cards, and X is the number of clues that Rex already has. When things went his way, which wasn't often these days, Rex was a good reporter with a nose for a story and an eye for detail. From Graham McNeil, Ghouls of the Miskatonic. I think that flavour text basically sums the card up, really. When things are going well for Rex, when he's finding his clues, when things are going well, they will continue to go well. This card will give you more cards you can play. Up to 5 cards on Rex, and you can draw up to 5 cards as a result of this card. Moving on to his weakness, Rex's curse. So unsurprisingly, it's a curse. As a revelation, you put it into play in your foot area, and it has the forced effect of when you would succeed a skill test, return the revealed chaos token to the bag and reveal a new chaos token. If this effect causes you to fail the test, then you shuffle it back into the deck, but you only do once per test. So that kind of ties in with Rex's background, about the terrible luck that he has, that he's sort of viewed as being cursed. There's always something goes wrong. So when this comes out into play, it just looks like he's going to pass the test, but is he second guessing himself? Is there some unforeseen event? You've got to draw that second chaos token and potentially fail the test. If you do fail the test, this goes back into your deck to come back again. If you pass the test, it stays there. So it's stuck with you, giving you this curse basically until you fail. And I really like the art there. I actually hadn't noticed it before. I just previously had only seen Rex's face reflected back in that tumbler of whiskey. But no, if you look closely, there's a fly in it. And if that doesn't symbolise Rex's curse, I don't know what does. Moving on to the rogue, we have Jenny Barnes, the dilettante. So, Jenny's backstory. Jenny Barnes has spent the majority of her young life in pursuit of creature comforts, fine dining and the latest fashions. That all changed when she received a letter from her sister Isabel. In this letter, Isabel confessed the mysterious forces were aligning against her and that she feared she may fall victim to some paranormal threat. It was the last letter Jenny received from her beloved sister. Jenny has since returned to the States to track down and investigate all occult occurrences she can find. Hardly a wilting flower, she has proven herself a crack shot as well as a fearless and clever investigator of the unknown. Until Isabel's disappearance is explained, Jenny will never relent in her search. So she has the most straightforward stat line we've seen to date. It's 3-3-3-3. So she's good at everything, basically. She's not amazing at everything, but she's good at everything. She's classed as a drifter, which actually is the same as another investigator we're going to see later. And sort of kind of to reflect her background, her privileged upbringing, her creature comforts, fine dining, etc., as it says on the back of the card. She basically gets an additional resource during every upkeep phase. So Jenny is basically, she's got money coming in all the time. And her Elder Sign effect is a +1 for each resource she has. So every time that Elder Sign pops up, as long as she's been banking her money, and that is a big stat boost for the infrequent time that the Elder Sign does pop up. The flavour text, no more Miss Barnes from you. My friends call me Jenny. And she's got the sort of a middling stat line of 8 health and 7 mental health. Moving on to Jenny's signature card. Jenny's twin 45s. A perfect fit. Is that a perfect fit for Jenny? Item, weapon, firearm. It's an asset, but its cost to play is X. So X basically is the ammo that the weapon will have. So if you've only got 1 resource to pay for this card, you can pay 1 resource, but you will only have 1 ammo. And I don't think there is a cap there. So if you've got 10 resources, you can play these cards with 10 ammo ready to go. If you're choosing not to play them, it's got the pips of 2 evade pips and a wild. And as an action, spend an ammo and fight, and you get +2 fight for this attack, and it deals +1 damage. And the flavour text is a quote. Say, are those Mr. Donahue's guns? Jenny held a pistol over her shoulder and struck a pose. I think they suit me better than him. Don't you agree? I've no idea who Mr. Donahue is. I've had a quick Google. Nothing shows up. But I'm sure somebody will write in and correct me that it's some major figure in Arkham lore that I am oblivious to. The only negative about the twin 45s, with the fact that they are twin 45s, they take up both hand slots. So it may restrict what other cards Jenny is able to play. Her weakness is searching for Izzy. It's classed as a task. And on a revelation, you attach searching for Izzy to the location farthest from you. Then when you finally get to that location, you do a double investigate, and if you succeed, instead of discovering clues, you discard searching for Izzy. So as forced effect, when the game ends, if it's still in play, you suffer a mental trauma. So it's very similar to Zoe's Smite the Wicked, only instead of finding an enemy in the distance to fight, you're finding a clue to Izzy's location in the distance, and you need to go off and find that. And again, it's playing into her obsession with finding her sister. Once she knows there's a clue out there, she needs to find it, otherwise she is going to be traumatised. Okay, now we're on to the mystic, Jim Culver, the musician. Jazz has been nothing but trouble for Jim since the day he picked up his daddy's trumpet. There was something weird and otherworldly about the writing on the inside of the bell, but the tones from it were smooth and dark like good coffee. That trumpet landed Jim a lot of gigs until the time it made Widow Jenkins get up and dance, the day he played at her funeral. After that, it was kind of hard to find work. Since then, Jim has learned a lot about jazz and the things the graveyard ghouls talk about on cold autumn nights. Lately, they've been talking about the end, as in the end of everything that is and could be, the final rhapsody. The fact is, Jim isn't too keen on that idea. So Jim's stats, he is a 4 willpower, 3 intellect, 3 combat, 2 evade, and he's classed as a performer. And he's got quite an interesting quite an interesting ability. Treat the modifier on skull tokens you reveal as 0. And anytime you reveal an Elder Sign token, you may choose to instead treat it as a skull token. So the way I look at it is I think the skull token is probably representing the dead or death. So Jim's not afraid of death. The dead speak to him, and if he blows his trumpet, he can make them dance, as happened with Widow Jenkins' funeral. He's not afraid of death. As a consequence, death or the skull chaos token does not have the same effect on him as it would have on other people. Elder Sign ability is just a +1, so it's nice and simple, but as we just mentioned, you can treat that as a skull instead, the importance of which might become clear in a second. Flavour text on his card is no, not quiet at all. Dead folks get downright rambunctious when I play my horn. So he's got sort of the middling stats of 7 and 8, physical and mental. Nothing specific about his deck building options either, so let's move on to his signature card, Jim's Trumpet, The Dead Listen. It's a 2-cost asset with 2 willpower and 1 wild pip. It's classed as item, instrument and relic. As a reaction, when a skull token is revealed during a skill test, you can exhaust Jim's Trumpet and heal a horror from an investigator at your location or at a connecting location. So the way I look at it there is that's kind of playing into the description about the trumpet. It's got smooth and dark tones. So you reveal that skull token. It's sort of the dead listen. Investigators at your location or at a connecting location can sort of be soothed and healed by that trumpet being played. Daddy used to say, jazz is a lot like liquor. It makes everything go down a little smoother. Daddy used to say a lot of stupid things. And then his weakness is called Final Rhapsody, again, which that was referred to in his backstory. That's what the dead have been talking about, the end of everything that is and could be. And quite aptly, the trait there is end times. So as a revelation, when this weakness crops up, reveal 5 Chaos tokens from the Chaos bag, and for each skull or tentacle token you reveal, you have to take a damage and a horror. I mean, obviously on some scenarios that can be worse than others depending on how many skull tokens are in the Chaos bag. When the dead start talking about what scares them, that is when it's time to listen. Lovely piece of art on there as well with sort of Jim's arm and the trumpet slowly sinking into the swamp. That is the final rhapsody that the dead have been talking about or warning them about. It's either coming to pass or maybe this is the effect of them talking about it, because as it said, Jim wasn't too keen on that idea, it said in his backstory. So it's like the dead are talking about these end times where everything is going to end, and that just horrifies Jim. He has to take damage and a horror for any of those symbols that come out of those 5 Chaos tokens. Right. Last but certainly not least, we have the survivor, Ashcan Pete the Drifter, another drifter. At night, Ashcan Pete sleeps wherever his travels take him, in a field, on a train, or maybe, if he's lucky, in a barn. He bunks with his loyal hound dog Duke on one side and his beat-up guitar on the other. And sometimes when Pete sleeps, he dreams. He dreams of haunted, tortured places and of horrible creatures. When he wakes up, he knows that someone needs his help because his dreams are true. He could not say how long he's been on the road, living by his wits, but he can say for certain, no place is too far to go to help someone in need. And as long as Pete can help people, he's not likely to stop wandering anytime soon. So Pete's stats are 4 willpower, 2 intellect, 2 combat, 3 evade. And he is a drifter, just like, I think it was Jenny. Now, unlike any of the other investigators we've seen so far, Pete begins the game with his signature asset Duke already in play. You're not going to wait for it to turn up in your deck. And as we'll see when we look at Duke, that makes Ashcan Pete very strong indeed because of the abilities. You don't have to go fishing through your deck. You don't have to spend the resource to put it in that first time. He starts with Duke in play. He has a free trigger ability of discard a card from your hand to ready an asset you control, but you can only do that once per round. Well, he is a drifter. He's going from place to place, sleeping rough, always moving. He doesn't get too attached to things, so yeah, you can just let something go and that will sort of empower you. He's always on the move, he doesn't get too attached to things, and therefore he has the flexibility to adapt to whatever situation he finds himself in. His Elder Sign effect is +2 and Ready Duke. With the flavour text, come here boy, we got work to do. Now his actual health stats are very low, but this is a 6 and a 5. But I think that is purely to reflect the fact that he does start with Duke in play. Duke has health of 2 and 3, so effectively you are starting the game with 8 and 8, which is really strong. So let's have a look at Duke. What is it about Duke that makes Pete so good? Well, basically Duke shores up Pete's 2 lowest stats. So he was a 4 willpower, but only a 2 intellect and a 2 combat and a 3 evade. Now Duke, Loyal Hound, he costs 2 to go in play. If for whatever reason he has left play, he will cost you 2 to put him back. He's an ally and a creature. He does not take up an ally slot though, so that's always good. So he has 2 action abilities. Firstly, you can exhaust Duke to fight, and you fight with a base combat skill of 4 and deals +1 damage. Or you can take an action to exhaust Duke to investigate, and you investigate with a base skill of 4. But also you can move to a connecting location immediately before investigating with this effect. So that gives you some economy of actions there, that you can move to a neighbouring location and investigate in one go. And not only that, you're investigating with a 4 when Pete's base skill is only a 2. Obviously the downside is you have to exhaust Duke to do that. So if you wanted to do a second investigation, you would have to either discard cards to ready Duke or use some of your other cards and abilities. So yeah, basically there we've got Duke is his loyal hound. He is there at Pete's side from day one. He's loyally helping his master out, sniffing out clues, or he's ready to defend him at a moment's notice. And then lastly we've got Pete's treachery, racked by nightmares. Revelation, exhaust all assets you control. So that means Duke basically, because he will most likely be in play. And anything else you've got, of course. Put Racked by Nightmares into play in your threat area. Assets you control cannot ready. So that is really, really punishing for Pete. It costs 2 actions to discard that. So it's like his dreams are getting the better of him. He just can't cope. He's frozen in fear almost, to quote another card. Yeah, he just can't function properly because he's just almost immobilised with... He has these nightmares, he has these dreams that they're always true, as it said in his backstory. When Pete sleeps, he dreams of haunted, tortured places and horrible creatures, and when he wakes up he knows that someone needs his help because his dreams are true. So he's dreaming of these awful things, these awful places, creatures, terrible things happening. He just can't bring himself to put Duke in harm's way, I guess, or bring himself to even use any of the other assets at his disposal until he sort of calms himself down. He takes a couple of actions to just give himself a bit of space, relax, move on. So yeah, that was my quick run through the Dunwich Legacy Investigators. Hopefully you found at least some of that of interest. If you've got any thoughts and theories about how the gameplay reflects the cards, how their backstory feeds into how those investigators play, I would love to hear them, because I'm certainly no expert, and I'm sure I've missed some tricks somewhere in how those sorts of things interact. But yeah, Krabby Terror and I will be back in the very near future taking a look at the Forgotten Age. We will be venturing off into the jungle and all the fun and frolics and happy times that will involve. So that's it for now, and thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.